Hey there, and thanks for taking a few minutes of your time to learn more about Church Pulse. Now, you're probably wondering, what is Church Pulse? And simply put, Church Pulse is a tool that we've built to help engage people from the street to the seat and beyond. Most often in church or in ministry, we emphasize the importance, the necessity, the value behind stewarding our financials of the church, the generosity of the people. But equally important is also stewarding the people that God is bringing into our congregations, into our communities, our church families. And so several years ago, I was a part of a church that was a growing church and a growing community. And we realized that we had a lot of people coming in the front door, but like many churches in America today, had just as many going out the back door. And it was for really one simple reason, and that was because those people hadn't been engaged or connected in some sort of next step. I believe, as we believe as a church, in Ephesians 2:10, which tells us that we are the workmanship of Christ, but beyond that, we're not just the masterpiece or the workmanship, the invention, if you will, of the Lord, but we were invented with a purpose, and that was the good works that He had prepared for us in advance. And so believing in Ephesians 2:10 tells me and motivates me that each and every person who comes to know Jesus has a next step to take. And so we've created the engagement pathway, which is essentially how we steward people from their first visit all the way through their greatest engagement. Now, for us, that could mean giving for the first time. For us, that could mean engaging in a life group or going to a membership class, and certainly serving in a ministry as well. But for us, we realized that this didn't just happen. It wasn't just something that somebody would walk in and then just kind of organically and by default say, I need to get connected. In fact, what we found most was that people had to be asked, and then we had to make the process of onboarding into these specific next steps easy and simple. And so we've spent the last 4 or 5 years creating an engagement pathway, and therefore building around it a dashboard, a software, which is what we call Church Pulse, which helps us take the pulse or the temperature, if you will, of our church, of our ministries, and kind of give us an overall idea of church health, of ministry health, of process health. And it also helps us plan and forecast for additional services, or the need for extra chairs, or even things like Easter and Christmas, knowing how many people we can expect. And we're using metrics and data just as a business would do, just as a corporation would do, but we're applying that to the church world, to the ministry world, and it's proved to be one of the healthiest, most valuable things that we've done over the last several years. And so I wanted to take just a handful of your minutes today to show you what Church Pulse is capable of. And so if you will, just take a few minutes to kind of follow along with me on your screen. Church Pulse is a software essentially that we create on our side, on the back end, that you would get a login to, just as you have for maybe your church management software, your CHMS. But this is a supplement to that. So we would build this for you, and you would get logins, and you could have different user types, and essentially as many users as you want. You can do this for volunteers, you can do this for staff, you can do this for administrators, executive pastors, and so on. And each of those users can see and use different functions. And so not everyone can see everything, but ultimately, an administrator can see each and every part of the dashboard and tool. And so what we've got here is the initial login page. And so I'm going to log in to my administration page or account. And it's going to open me up to this metric overview. This is the dashboard. And so you see your navigation bar on the left, and then you see all of your metric overview dashboard on the right, or there in the center. And we can toggle this from this year to this month to all time. Right now, most of what you're seeing, I'm just going by this year. But again, you can toggle to see different metrics for different seasons of the year. Again, this year, this month are all time. So you can kind of see your overall health. But as you go through, these are just some of the metrics that are being tracked. You've got your average visit from membership, which is telling us how long does it typically take from someone's first visit to the time they want to engage in a membership class. Now, we do that at our church every 90 days, but if you did it once a month, you would see fairly low numbers, generally speaking, with this particular metric. But again, it's showing you the desire of those new guests coming in. How quickly are they wanting to learn more. Another metric that you see is the average inquiry to contact. And what that's tracking is how many days on average does it take your team collectively from the time someone inquires to serve in a ministry to the time they're contacted and onboarding begins. And so you're seeing your overall health of your onboarding processes and system. Also, you have average life group to contact. That's the same thing, but instead of getting involved in a ministry, this is how long it takes from the time someone inquires to be in a life group to the time they're contacted and starting to connect to a life group. So you're seeing the health of your discipleship, the health of your people saying, hey, we're ready, we're craving, we're hungry for more in Bible study and life groups. The next one you see is total onboarded volunteers. And so this is essentially tracking how many people have inquired and started their onboarding process and are now serving in any of the ministries. This is a collective number. And so, again, as you toggle through this year, this month, all time, that number is going to change depending on the month and what you have selected. But this gives you an idea of how many volunteers you've onboarded and connected to a ministry. You can also track the life group interest. This shows you how many people are inquiring in that year, again, that month, or maybe all time. You can also see how many people in that membership class completed have actually gone to a membership class. Then moving down the line, membership plus ministry referral. So what this is essentially doing is this is the amount of people in percentage form who have attended a membership class and then also took a next step to connect and serve in some kind of opportunity. So it's essentially taking that number of 18 that we see on this dashboard and telling you what percentage of that 18 took an extra step after membership class. As we continue moving, you see guest to membership. So this is telling you how many of your guests, again, in percentage form, how many of your guests have moved from their first visit to actually going to a membership class, right? So it's giving you that overall percentage. So you can see, again, how eager people are as first-time guests to connect and learn more about your church. Overall, total guests, this will tell you how many guests you've had in a particular period of time. So again, this year, this month, or all time. So you can see how many new people have visited your church. And then as we scroll down, we see our guest retention rate. And the guest retention is essentially saying these individuals, based on the total guests, this many percent or this much percent of total guests have done one of three things. They've gone to a membership class, they've connected to a life group, or they've connected to serve in some fashion or form in a ministry. And so this is showing your overall guest retention, specifically with adults, those who are taking a next step and saying, hey, I want more than just a Sunday morning attendance experience. This also allows you through the profiles to track salvations and baptisms. You see that there's 0 here because this is just an example church. But in each profile, as you're checking off baptism or salvation on individuals' profiles, it's tallying that up here as well. And then we also have our kids return rate. And what this is tracking, and I'm going to show you this in a moment, this is tracking how many new kids in a month's time returned at least a second time in the same month. And so you're tracking your kids return rate or kids retention rate via that. And I'll show you how you do that here in just a moment. And then ultimately the potential realized gain. This is taking your guest retention and your total guests, and it's telling you based on that retention, you've gained X amount of people over the last 30 days or the last 12 months, whatever period of time you have selected. And so this kind of gives you an idea of how many new people have connected and are continuing to come back. As we scroll down, there's some other metrics and things as well. Engagement trends. So what you're seeing here is month by month across the bottom. You're tracking how many new volunteers you've onboarded per month. And you're also tracking on the blue stripe on the bottom how many people have been contacted after inquiring about wanting to be in a life group. And so you see your overall engagement trend between serving and life groups here in this one. Ministry engagement tells you how many people you've onboarded thus far as volunteers, and then it breaks it down by ministries, which this can be tailored and customized to your church, but it's generations, connections, prayer, and care, outside the walls, which is our missions ministry, tech and broadcast, facilities, and cafe. The green shows you how many people have been onboarded into that ministry, and the red shows you how many pending inquiries there are for that particular ministry. And so an executive pastor, an administrator can look at this and see who's followed up, who hasn't, who's falling behind, those kinds of things. And then we also have a baptism history graph as well. And so this will show you year to year. So the yellow here is 2025, the green is 2026. And so it'll kind of show you comparatively where you're at and your totals for the year. And then down here, what you see is retention health. And this is essentially showing you just kind of an approximate growth health or retention health. And so you see the graph there, it's from 0 to 13+%. Generally speaking, churches in America, the attrition rate's between 7 to 10%. Sometimes can be skewed a little bit higher, but generally speaking around 10% or less, which means that for a church to be growing, you have to have a net growth, and that has to, your guest retention rate has to be north of 10%. So in this case, 12%, you can see the line right here scoring this particular example church, and it's in the growth posture. It's a steady growth posture. And so this is just a way to kind of see an overall church health and say, hey, how are we doing? If somebody asks the question, how are we doing? You could show them just this one piece, and it would give them a relatively good idea that you're in a growth posture, a declining posture, you're in a significant growth posture, so on and so forth. So that's kind of your overall metrics page. But if you go back to the top here and specifically on the navigation bar, what you're going to see here are a handful of tabs, right? The first one says people, and the people tab, you can go in here and create profiles, just like you would have in your CHMS. And so what you can do here is you can do a mass import of all of your profiles that you already have in your database if you wanted to pull those into Church Pulse and then go through and update every profile. But if you didn't want to do that, what you could do is if you wanted to add an individual, you would go to add person. And then as you scroll down, what you would find is basically your typical profile. You'd fill in the first name, last name, all the contact information. Some other things that this will do is that if you put a birthday in that's younger than 18, it'll actually automatically categorize them as a kid. And then it'll also populate a special designation section where you can actually note and upload PDFs of things like child custody agreements and so on. So that if you wanted those on file, you could have those in those profiles as well. But you can see here, I've just got a handful of templated people with all their basic information. If you were to click on one, you could look in the profile and you can edit, of course. You can see their phone number. This one doesn't have any other contact information, but if it did, it would be up here under the name. And then you can see next steps. And so you can add in their first date visit, which is auto-populated when you create them manually or even when you upload them as CSV. You can also add in their membership date. Down here you can click membership class, you can click spiritual gifts, you can click ministry referral, and when you do that, you assign them to a ministry that they're interested in. So if somebody says, hey, I'm most interested in XYZ ministry, you could go in here and go to their profile, select ministry referral, and then add them to a queue inside Church Pulse that notifies that ministry leader and has all that contact information ready. And there's a handful of other ways to do that as well that I'll show you in just a second. Life group interest and baptized down here again, salvation, baptism. When you click those, it's going to update those metrics on that main dashboard. And then once you've made all your edits, you click save next step and it'll save it. And of course you can go back to all of your people and scroll through and find, whoever. So that's your main database of people. You can also group by family. And so right now I don't have family set up in this example, but essentially what you would do is you would actually go into a person's profile and you could assign them to a family. And what would happen is it would show up under families. You would see up here, you would see the family's last name, and then it would have all of the children and adults that have been assigned to that family. And then you can search by family here if needed. And so that's just kind of another little search feature that sometimes makes it a little bit easier to find. Down on the navigation, we move to ministry follow-up. This is one of my favorite pieces of Church Pulse because I think a lot of churches, one of the challenges is their onboarding and follow-up process. What we found at my previous church, and I think a lot of other churches as well, is that someone inquires, maybe by word of mouth or maybe through some type of form submission. But generally speaking, a lot of our ministry leaders rightfully are so busy with so many other tasks that it takes them 3, 4, 5 days to get around to it. And in our case, we had some times that it was taking, upwards of 10 to 14 days. And at that point, those volunteers, or those potential volunteers, I should say, have moved on. They've lost interest. And so we decided we needed to come up with a format that made it simple and easy for a volunteer coordinator or a ministry leader to follow up. And so essentially what happens here is that when a new inquiry is submitted, either through the individual's profile or through the next step form, which I'm going to show you, it's an internal piece of Church Pulse. Once they select their ministry, it actually automatically assigns their profile to one of the ministry leaders up here in the top. And so a good example here is, let's go to connections. You see that it has 2 open inquiries, meaning that they haven't been followed up with. And so when a ministry leader sees this, they get the email notification, they see that red dot, they can click on it, and they can see how many people are waiting to be followed up with and connected. And they can also see how long that they've been waiting for to get contact. And so you see here that this person's been waiting 8 days, so is this person. And so the way this works is that ministry leader would go to edit follow-up. They already have all their contact information. The date inquiry, the day that this person was interested, is already in there. We know it's the connections ministry. And so what we do is we would go in here and we would say, hey, I followed up with this person today, which would be April 11th. So I would click April 11th, go through, I can add any notes that I need to add, and then I'm going to change it from pending to serving and hit update. And it takes that contact away. Now you can still see your completed contacts down here, so you can expand it, but it takes that contact away and automatically changes that alert button at the top from 2 now down to 1. And so in an ideal world, the ministry leaders would go through on a regular basis and clear out any notifications they have. But what this also does is it immediately updates the person's profile in Church Pulse, saying that they're an engaged member. It's also changing the metrics on the dashboard. It's adding that volunteer to all of those different metric numbers that you see. And it's doing that all automatically in the background. So all you're doing is simply giving an easy engagement pathway for both potential volunteers and also your ministry leaders, right? And so you can assign, we could customize each and every one of these for the ministry leaders or the ministry teams that you have, but these are just here as an example. And then you can also go in here and add each individually. So if somebody does communicate by word of mouth to a ministry leader that they want to be a greeter, they could take down their name on a piece of paper and they could actually come in here and add that person to the queue manually. But for the most part, they're going to come in through a form submission. And so that's how ministry follow-up takes place inside of Church Pulse. We also have our guest follow-up, and what this is, very similar to the ministry follow-up, except for instead of a next step form submission, it's a connect card submission, which again is an internal form built into Church Pulse. It can be customized, of course, but when that form is submitted, it immediately creates a profile and collects all that information, but it also dumps them into this guest follow-up engagement process. So you have your initial guest follow-up, your secondary follow-up, and then invite to DNA, which DNA is what we call membership. And so let me show you very quickly how that works. So we have forms built in. We have a life group follow-up form, a decision follow-up form, a take your next step serving form, and then the connect card. And so what I'm going to do is show you how the connect card works. So going into the connect card, I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to add myself. Sorry, last name goes down here. I'm going to add myself. I'm going to add a random number. And I'll actually use my real, well, I shouldn't use my real email because there's already one in there with that. Let's see. Do that. And then I'm just going to put in a fake address for now. When I hit submit, it's going to pop up with a notification saying, thank you, you've submitted this form successfully. So maybe there's a time in your service where the Connect card is submitted by QR code or something like that. But now that that QR code has been submitted, or that form has been submitted, when I come back to my guest follow-up, now it shows a notification in guest follow-up, and it's the form that I just submitted. And I can go in here and I can add notes and make my phone call, send my email, and then once I've done the first step of our engagement process, I hit first call completed, and it will now move it to the secondary follow-up. And so for us, that's a second call 10 to 14 days after their first visit. So same thing here, that person can call, add some notes from the call, save, and then hit second call complete. And then it dumps them into the invite to DNA. And it'll sit here, for us, it sits here for 60 to 70 days, and then we start to work through that list to make phone calls with personal invitations to our next DNA or membership class. And as we do that, again, we can go in here, add notes from those conversations, and then hit complete. And now it'll take that particular contact completely out. And so we do this each and every week for our guest follow-up. And so again, all those forms are native. They're inside of Church Pulse. Makes it nice and easy to make that follow-up. And then what's really neat is that if you go in here and you search for that particular person, you can actually see all of those notes that I added from all those phone calls. They're saved to the profile. So you can always go back and say, oh man, I remember that person said something. I don't remember what it was. Where were they from? Where'd they move from? And you can make those notes. It saves it to that person's profile. So that's a little bit about the guest follow-up tab. The other one is decision follow-up, and this works the exact same way as guest follow-up, except for it's the decision follow-up form. And so essentially somebody gives their contact information, they select salvation or baptism or both, and it's going to come here and it's going to show which contacts are pending. Your discipleship or group's pastor may want to be the person following up, making phone calls, having those counseling discussions, and then it'll also track those decisions as you complete that. It's tracking those decisions by month down here for your record as well. And so you can go back in history and you can see that. Life group follow-up works exactly the same way. There's a life group follow-up form. It dumps them into this pending queue. You would go in here, your group's person would make that follow-up contact. Once that's done, you would hit mark as complete. It takes it away from pending and then adds it to your completed down here on the bottom. So again, you can still see your history. And remember, all of this is being tracked on the back end so that your metrics are staying up to date on your main dashboard. Also, to the point of forms, if somebody already has a profile, let's say somebody got baptized 2 or 3 months ago and you're tracking that, they already have a profile and now they want to get connected to a ministry, when they complete the next step form, it's actually going to match, if their name, email, and phone number match, it's actually going to match their profile. It's not going to create another profile. It's going to go ahead and just start merging those two together automatically so that you don't have a ton of duplicates in your overall profile database. So we've talked thus far about the dashboard, the profiles, the families, ministry follow-up, guest and decision follow-up, and now life group follow-up. But now, and we talked a little about forms too, and so you've seen, again, those forms that are native, they are customizable, so you can go through and edit them if you would like. You can add different questions, different information you'd like to collect. You could even create new forms of your own if you'd like, and it automatically gives you URLs to be able to share those. So we talked about forms, we talked about all of those so far, but now let's talk about attendance. Again, this comes back to that idea that numbers aren't the most important thing to God. People are, and if people matter to God, we have to steward them. Well, how do we steward people? Well, first it's through engagement, but it's also through making room for people to join us and encounter Jesus. And so tracking our Sunday morning attendance is important. Now, what I found, myself included, is a lot of places we're just tracking it in a fancy Excel sheet or a Google sheet, something along those lines, which is perfect if all you want is data collection. But I wanted more than collection. I wanted to use that data with some type of benefit or purpose. And that specifically for us was not just tracking, but it was also forecasting the next month and the next year and so on and so forth. And so we've added this feature in this attendance tab where we can actually go through and add new attendance. We add the date And then for us, we have 3 services, but again, this is customizable, and we would add how many adults and kids for each service. You can add another service if you have some specialty service you want to add that particular week, and you can also track your live stream viewers here as well. And then once you click save, it automatically goes in here and it tracks and graphs it on this graph. So this is a comparative graph between 2025 and 2026, so you can see where you are comparatively to last year. It's also going to show you specifically kids attendance trends, 25 to 26, and so on and so forth. And then back at the top, it's going to use all of your averages. So it's going to tell you how many Sundays that you've tracked so far inside of Church Pulse. It's going to tell you what your average adults are within the last, or the current year. It's going to tell you what your average kids attendance is for current year. And then it's going to break that average down by service as well. So you can see what your average adults are per service. And then overall, it's going to give you a year-over-year percentage increase or decrease. So in this case, it would be a 30% year-over-year growth from the most current Sunday to the Sunday closest to that last year. And so it's giving you this information that's just kind of helpful for you to see growth and retention, but also to make some forecasting when you need to put in extra chairs, when you need to add a service, those kinds of things. And again, just like on the dashboard, you can toggle between this year and this month. But if we scroll down to the bottom, we're going to come back to the forecast in just a second. But what you see here is you're seeing all of the past Sundays. So if you did want to go back just for the sake of record and knowing how many kids were in a particular service on a particular Sunday, you could find that date, you could expand it, and it'll tell you your total adults that Sunday, but it'll also break down by service how many adults, how many kids, and then also what your live stream total was for that particular Sunday. And if you do make a mistake, there's the option to always go back and edit that as well. And so it's tracking all this information, but then one of the things that I'm most passionate about is forecasting. And so you see here that it's actually giving you an attendance forecast for that particular Sunday 12 months from now. And what it's doing is it's using some algorithms and some forecasting formulas to determine, based on your current growth trends, based on your current retention, you could expect X amount of people this time next year. And so it'll give you a forecasted total, as you see here, but it'll also tell you the expected range, that it could be anywhere inside of this number, but this is what we're thinking it might be based on the trends that you currently have. And so it's been really helpful for us because we were able to, Christmas time this past year, add another service based on the forecasted date that was being given to us. And we didn't end up using Overflow at all for Christmas this year, simply because we took the data and we heeded its advice and added another service in one of the more high demand times, and it was super helpful. We got to engage and help more people encounter Jesus in the main room than having to put them in Overflow. And so it was really, really helpful for us. So that's just the attendance feature. And again, this is becoming more robust as time goes on and the more feedback that we get. And then just kind of going through a couple of these, mass communication. This is something that you can export a CSV of all the contacts, all the profiles inside of your Church Pulse, but you can also export by ministry. So anybody who's inquired or onboarded into a particular ministry, you can go in here and select it and then export just those contacts. You can export connect cards from a certain period of time. So this says the last 30 days. You could change that to the last 90 days or 120 days, and then export and communicate with those people via email or phone. And then you can also export by status, which would be guest, regular attender, member, or kids. And then you can export them in a large group fashion and make that communication as well. And this is, again, something that is becoming more robust as we get more feedback about the needs from other churches. There is a scheduling feature on here. This is not something that we're currently using. We're using everything else, but this is something that we've recently added. But it allows you to schedule volunteers by ministry. So you see your ministry tabs here. But simply put, I mean, it's just like any other scheduling software. You would create a Sunday, so you put the date. You could title it Easter, Christmas, whatever it might be, or it might just be a regular Sunday gathering. So like if we did that for Sunday, April 12th, let's just say it was a Sunday gathering. We would create that, and now we see that gathering here. And what we would do is we could actually go in here and add a service time. So for us, it would be 8. And then we could add a position. Now, there is a way to create defaults, so you don't have to add these every time. But let's just say this was kids. This was check-in. We could add another one that says kinder, and so on and so forth. And then what you can do is you can go in and you can actually assign people from their profiles in Church Pulse. And this is set up to where you, once it's all done, you can send notifications and they can accept or decline just like any other software, scheduling software. And then it does give you a ministry dashboard to tell you how many positions you need for that particular Sunday, how many are unfilled and open, and how many people have responded yes. And so just kind of a neat feature that we're working on. All of them are the same with the exception of worship. Worship actually allows you the opportunity, and I'll just show you quickly. It actually allows you the opportunity to go in here and add a worship time. And you could, for worship, for us, it would be the same service over and over. You could add positions. So let's say drums. Again, just like the others, you can go in here and assign a person to that particular role. But also, under the worship tab, they can schedule their service orders. And so they can go in here and they can say it's a song, it's communion, it's scripture, announcement, whatever it might be. You don't have to add a service time here if you don't want to. And then the title of this particular thing, if it's a song, if it's a sermon, a special, something like that, and how long that's going to take. Now, once you do that, let's just say this is song 1. Once you add it, it actually gives you the ability to go in here and you can change and edit all the things that you just said. You can assign somebody to that particular song. Maybe they're leading that song. And then you can also add special notes. You can add a link if you wanted to link to like YouTube or something like that as an example. You can add that. And you can also upload PDFs. So if you wanted to upload lyric sheets, chord charts, tab charts, those kind of things, that can be done here as well. So much like other scheduling softwares, you can go in here, schedule people, assign people, create a service order, have all the resources they need to be prepared for Sunday. Now, again, this is something that's kind of new to Church Pulse, that probably the most recent thing to be added. So still refining, not something that we're quite using yet. We're using everything else, but we're not quite using that yet. But just so you kind of know, that's something that is coming up over the next couple of weeks or month or so. The last thing I wanted to show you was our kids retention calculator. If you remember back on the main metric dashboard, we had the kids return rate. And here's how we determine that. Now, you can't put guest retention and kids return together. You can't average it together because you're going to have some overlap, because some of those kids' parents also took a next step through membership, Bible study, or serving. So you can't, there's some crossover, not a ton, but there's some crossover. So for the integrity of the metrics and the data, you can't combine these as an average. So you have to leave them separate. But kids return helps us determine the people who haven't done one of those big 3, membership, life groups, or serving. It helps us determine the rest of the group, how many of them are coming back. And so we do that through kids return rate or percentage. So here's how we do that. So on our kids retention calculator, we can go in there, and for this one, I'm going to say this is March 2026. So that's we do this by the month. So for March 2026, you would go in here and you would go into your CHMS and you would download a CSV file of all the kids' check-ins from that particular month. And so I've already done that for March. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to upload that, and it's going to be March kids check-in. And now it uploads that CSV to that particular portion of the calculator. Then we're going to go through, and we have saved reports that do this for us. That's pretty much an ability of every CHMS. And so these are by default. We just go in, find the saved search, we can download it, and then upload it. And so the second one we download is a list of all the new profiles that had been created during the month of March, or whatever that period of time is. And then we sequence it down to only give us people that are under the age of 11, because our check-in on Sunday morning stops at 4th grade. And so it's only under the age of 11 or under the grades of 4 and under. And so we get that every month. Now we're going to take that, March New Kids, is what I called it, and we're going to add that. Once both of those are in there, it's going to automatically, through this button, it's going to calculate the return rate. And so it's comparing those two lists and seeing which names essentially are on both lists at least 2 times, because they're already going to appear on there once because they've checked in and they've also had a profile created. So at least 2 times have been checked in, and this is telling us essentially how many kids came for the first time and it came back at least one other time in that same month. And so then it gives you a list, and so it tells us that in March, 87% of our first-time kids came back at least one other time in the same month, which equates to 77 kids who came back out of, I believe, well, it tells you the total first time was 89. So 77 out of 89 came back at least one other time in the same month, and then it actually gives you a list of the kids who did. Now, this saves this calculation for everyone that you run. And so you can see that I've run March twice just because I was doing this a little bit earlier. But you can always go back and see the history of each month's retention for kids as well. And then what this does is it takes every time you run this, it will take the most recent calculation, and that's what it will show on your main metric dashboard for the kids' return rate. So overall, Church Pulse is just that. You're checking the pulse of your church. You're checking the pulse of your ministry teams, of your processes and your systems, and then it's spitting out data and information that helps you first see what you should celebrate, what's going really well, team members that you need to celebrate big wins with. Also, it gives opportunities for some accountability to be able to look at an individual, a ministry, a team, and say, hey, walk me through your ministry follow-up process, because based on the information, it looks like we're falling a little bit behind on, follow-up of ministry inquiries or something along those lines. And so it's helpful to be able to steward people. Again, the whole idea behind this is not to overvalue numbers and metrics, but it's actually to use numbers and metrics because they represent people, and people matter to God. And so if we're going to steward people, we want to make sure they're not falling through the cracks, they're not being forgotten or left behind. And so one of the best ways we can do that is through tracking metrics and data like this, so that we can see where are the back doors, where are the holes and the cracks that people are falling through, and then we can go and we could shore those things up and close those doors so that we don't have those things happening anymore. So again, Church Pulse is just a tool that we're using, and prayerfully you could use as well, to take the temperature, to take the pulse, the health of your church, your organization, and ultimately steward God's people into their Ephesians 2:10 calling, which tells us that we are God's workmanship, and we have been created with certain skills and gifts for the good works that He has intended for us, that He has prepared for us in advance. And we use Church Pulse to help people from the street to their seat and beyond. Man, I'm so grateful that you've taken just a few minutes, actually way more than a few minutes, but hopefully you found this valuable and helpful to maybe making a decision to also be using Church Pulse to help steward your people towards their Ephesians 2:10 calling as well. Thank you again. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon.